never know when I'm gonna have to shoot. So I'm watching everything. And bro watching everything. I know we feel the same way. Said Draco, kill text 2, 762. I can't wait to bust it, you ain't gon' do. Kill text 2, 762. I can't wait to bust it, you. I can't wait to bust it, you. If you don't know this dance, this where the fuck you learned it at. Yeah. Draco, kill text 2, 762. I can't wait to bust it, you ain't gon' do. Kill text 2, 762. I can't wait to bust it, you ain't gon' do. Kill text 2, 762. I can't wait to bust it, you ain't gon' do. Kill text 2, 762. I can't wait to bust it, you. That's you. I can't wait to bust it, you. That's you.
Yo, Big Storm by Oscar Walik, family, Yoko, unte chamo. What it do, family? We gonna pick up where we left off yesterday. Yeah, I mean, y'all can go back to the last live to see what we was talking about. There's some gems in that one. It's gonna be even more in this one. On this one, we gonna talk about more about the feminine, position or deal in the ancient civilizations, and also how at the end of this, like the 10 pages that we're gonna read, how the Aztecs or the ancient so-called Mayans got a lot of their beliefs from the Mayans, but they just manipulated it and made it to some shit that it wasn't. But we're gonna get into all that, right? Share out the live, tap a screen for me for anybody that joined in. We ain't gonna wait too long. Y'all know how I do. I'm gonna play one more song and then we just gonna get to it. You heard me? Let's go.
So you think you know Wix? Do you really? First up, we've got Video Man. Tony calls.
What it do, family? After this song, we're gonna get to the work. I mean, a couple gems, not too much. We ain't gonna be here too long. Yo, go to everybody coming in.
Keep out his paper, we haven't still come in to flip. Started off riding Batman with the geeks. When that shit didn't work, talk to pop about the chicken. All of them talk my bad ass, feel like Lisa was living, but taught me the ways of that kitchen. Don't need me a pot, I can microwave with me. I think the high seat just like a Christian. Went from that set to the spot, now we living. Still running their mouth, they gon' die about the minutes. They bitches and most of them not from the trenches. Come to my block, come to see how we living. We chillin' with blocks, and I got extensions. Move to the north, cause I see they was winning. Go ask about it, got a spot, had to spin it. I went from bottle to clutch in the ceiling. Was robbing, he ducked, you it up, then we kill him. One-legged partner, if I can't hear a killer. Came back from the dead, bitch, I'm feeling like killer. I asked your hoe, bitch, you know I'm that nigga. She came through the circle, just know she a spiller. She'll swallow it off for a pill and some liquor. Having our way could retire a strip, but instead by the BBL got to be still. A fuck nigga play, he get found in the river. Her diamonds first, they so cold, make me shit. I been pouring up drink, know it's hurting my liver. Shit, that's the cops keep saying for these niggas. He say the wrong thing, let it rain on these niggas. Damn, he all ain't no shame in these niggas. Be all on the niggas, still claim you a killer. Bitch, if you real, hit my check, I look nigga. Admit it, these niggas don't rap what they live and don't live what they rap, but that shit really count. I heard through the blind.
They don't live what they teach. You heard me? But nah, we about to get to this. All right, so we ain't gonna wait too long. So yesterday we got y'all can go back to the previous live. We got into who we talking about? Quest lots yeah. We got into she was what last yeah. Tisley. Yeah, that's who she is. But we're gonna get into it. Y'all know as I go through it, we're gonna go through the words. I may pronounce some right. I'm, working on touching on my Nawat and my Yucatec Maya. So I'm learning currently so I can be proficient in this shit. But I give y'all some of the real pronunciations. Other ones that I fuck up, excuse me. All right, let's get to it. We're gonna start at where it says reverting to the organization because there's some powerful shit that we about to talk to, right? We're gonna see how they kind of construed things as time went on, right? But the men and the women always held an equal position in our ancient civilizations and practices or ways of thought. It's only until more recently where the patriarchal or way of making a man, just even though we that, you feel me? But the woman is just as important. We need duality, balance, the woman is just as important as we are. And you don't think that, something wrong with you. Shit me. All right, but let's continue. Revert to the organization of the native race into 7 tribes and the wandering of the 7th and principal division under the leadership of Wazilo Wait, hold on. Let me get it right. Wazilo Pochli. That's how you actually say the name. Hold on. Yeah. So Wazilo Pochli, according to Tezozomak, Wazilo Pochli was accompanied by a woman who was called his sister and was carried by 4 men. She was a powerful sorceress possessed by the power of assuming the shape of an eagle and had made herself greatly feared and caused herself to be adored as a goddess. Indignant at her ignorance, the priest counseled a course which was adopted by the Mexicans. And when they say Mexicans, they're talking about ancient Mexicans, not the Mexicans as we know of today, right? The woman and her family left behind at Malinalco, where they settled and populated the town, whilst the other portion of the tribe, under strictly masculine rule, advanced towards Tula, where they established themselves. This was the 2nd division which has taken place among the Mexicans or Aztecs. And when they reached Tula, they found their number greatly diminished. The same incident is related with greater detail by Torquemada, from which we learned that a great animosity was felt against the women. That's some gay shit. But you know what I mean? On one occasion, which I shall not pause to describe, 2 war chiefs menaced her. The talk she gave them in return is so remarkable that it deserves to be quoted in full, for it affords a deep insight into the native mode of expression, teaches us titles of the woman, and shows that her position was undoubtedly one of powerful authority. Now, quel. So do you see that QU is que? So que latli. That's how you say it. Quest latli. All right. I know it's spit everywhere, but that's how you pronounce the shit. I am Quest latli, your sister and of your tribe. You know this, and yet you think of that. The dispute or difference you have with me is like an ordinary one, such as you might wage war any other base woman who possess little spirit or courage. If you indulge in this thought, you are deceiving yourselves, for I am valiant and manly, and my titles will oblige you to acknowledge this. For besides the ordinary name of Quatlatl, by which you know me, I also possess 4 titles by which I know thyself, and the first of these is Siwakuat. You see that C-I, that C, that H-U-A is Y, it's a Y sound, so it ain't huh or none of that shit. and Ku, and that CO is look like it's a Kodu, that's Kuat. So Siwa Kuat equals the woman serpent or twin. The second is K Y Siwat. Siwat. I'm probably fucking that one up though. The eagle woman, which equals the eagle woman. So the first one of her first names that she's known by is a regular name, and that's Quetlatsli. Quetlatsli, right? Quetlatsli, right? That's the first name. That's her regular name, and then her second name is the serpent woman, right? Which is Siwakwat, right, or twin. That's Kuat can mean twin. That's what that means. But she's known as the serpent woman, and Keawat Siwat equals the eagle woman. And the third is Yao Siwat equals the woman warrior. And the fourth is Tez Zizimitsiwat, the woman of the underworld. From the properties or qualities conveyed by these titles, you appreciate who I am, what power I yield, and what harm I can do you. If you want to test the truth of this, here is my challenge. Now that's some gangster shit that she talking about. Hold on, let me change this, because I just was breaking down how you say the words and shit, but I don't know if it messed up what she was actually saying. So she talking filthy to them right now. So she said, yo, you don't know who I am? Let me tell you who I am. I'm the serpent woman, I'm the eagle woman, I'm the woman warrior, and I'm the woman of the underworld. And if you don't notice, if you want to test it, then here's my challenge. And then after this, they responded, right? They said, these two brave captains, undaunted by the arrogant words which she attempted to terrify them, responded, if you are as valiant as you describe yourself to be, we are not less so. But you are a woman, and it is not meant that it should said of us that we took up arms against women, and without speaking further, they left her much affronted that a woman should challenge and defy them. They kept silence about this occurrence so that the people should not know of it. All right, they ain't want to let nobody know that Shorty was over here. You know what I mean? She just talked crazy to them, put them in their place, and sent them along their way. You feel me? So they ain't mention that to nobody, right? Now, commentating upon this passage says, it is impossible to doubt that this tradition refers to an important event in the history of the Aztec tribe. I mean, it contains the record of a religious struggle. The full significance of the narrative will become clear. I think when the following points are dwelt upon, one thing is certain. Here is a historical personage, a woman who was termed the sister of Huitzilopochtli, who evidently, or y'all heard me pronounce his name before as Huitzilopochtli, but the correct way to pronounce his name, as I'm learning, is Huitzilopochtli. All right. And let me read that over. My bad. The full significance of the narrative will become clear. I think when the following points are dwelt upon, one thing is certain. Here is a historical personage, a woman who is termed the sister of Huitzilopochtli, who has evidently exerted a high authority and whose titles were actually the names of the highest female divinity. Sawagan states that Quetzalcoatl, a goddess the same as Siwakoat, was the mother of all and was also named Tonantizin, equals our mother. I could have fucked that up. What is more significant still is that in all historical records antedating the conquest, a man bearing the feminine title of Siwakoat equals serpent woman is distinctly and repeatedly mentioned as a co-adjutor of the Mexican ruler, right? So that part basically saying how, how when they met, it was a dude whose name was Siwakoat, right? And that literally means serpent woman. So that tells you at one time that title of Siwakoat was actually held by a woman, right? So it shows the importance of that. But as we continue, y'all, we're gonna learn little bit more about it, right? And that was the co-adjutor of the Mexican ruler, right? So that was the co-ruler, right? They had the same position or the same power, right? But we're gonna continue and see how it changed. Now, on the social organization mode of government of the ancient Mexicans, to which I refer to, the reader discusses the relative positions of Montezuma and the Cihuacuatl, and states here this is no doubt their equality of rank, though their duties were somewhat different. This equality is illustrated by the records that both rulers shared the same privileges regarding dress. Thus, they alone wore sandals, and the Cihuacuatl is termed the second or double of the king, his coadjutor. The latter author, however, gives the full sacred title as Tlilpotanque. Tlilpotanque. I could be pronouncing that a little bit off. Cihuacuatl, literally the black powdered serpent woman. And we thus, let me change the page for y'all. All right, so that part is telling you like she how powerful she was and her titles, right? Now let's continue. Now it says the latter author, however, gives the full sacred title as Tlilpotanque Cihuacuatl, literally the black powdered woman serpent, and we thus learned that whilst Montezuma's garments were habitually blue, like Huitzilopochtli, is his coadjutor, like Tezcatlipoca, was associated with black. It is well known that some of the Mexican priests also smeared their bodies with black, which was therefore their special mark. To my idea, foregoing data with circumstantial evidence to my bad, let me slow it down. To my idea, the foregoing data with circumstantial evidence to be conveniently produced clearly indicate that at one time in early history of the Aztec race, it had been governed jointly by a male and a female ruler on a footing of perfect equality, that one being the living representative of the above or masculine and the masculine elements, and the other personifying the below or feminine elements. The fact that Cihuacuatl is named the sister of Huitzilopochtli shows the female ruler was not necessarily his wife, although she was his coadjutor in her own right. Both rulers were respectively served by four persons, presumably of their respective sex. Besides these Duran records that there were also other 7 Teot equal lords who were much reverenced on the account on 7 caves of which the 7 tribes had come. All right. And we talked about that shit later. It's going to talk a little bit about the 7 caves and all of that. And, that's we talked about it yesterday. Y'all can go, go look at that. All right. We thus perceive that at one time the chief authority was vested in a man and a woman, his sister, who enjoyed a perfect equality. 4 persons administered the government of each ruler, and each of the 7 tribes had its honored representative. For how long this organization had existed is impossible to tell. So they don't know. Dissension arose and division supervened, but to the time of the conquest, the identical form of government was enforced, with the remarkable difference that the title and office of Cihuacuatl, originally held by a woman, were held by a man, in whom I do not hesitate to identify as one of the 2 supreme pontiffs, whose emblem of office was the flint knife, the offspring of Cihuacuatl, the Earth Mother, right? So right there is clearly said how when the time of conquest came, that it was a dude with the title of a woman, right? So we knew it was a change in rulership at some point. Historical evidence shows that this alteration had not been made without bloodshed and renewed difficulties. Thus it is related that after the Mexicans had separated from the sister of Huitzilopochtli and her adherents, they were induced to ask the daughter of the ruler of Colhuacan to become the queen of Mexicans and the mother of their god. She had confronted them. She had confronted with their request, but also subsequently killed by her subjects who flayed her body and dressed a youth in her skin. That's crazy. A figure of native speech, which symbolized his assumption of her office. Man, I don't give a fuck, but it sound like they might have really did that. That sound crazy. Under this form, she was revered as a goddess and was named our granddaughter and the mother of the god, etc. These and the following details have taken. Let me change this for you right quick. All right, boom. These and the following details taken from the well-known authentic native sources are attractively rendered in the that's some Dutch name, Nieuwe Welt on Amerikanische Historian, right? Again, after the Mexicans had been settled in Tenochtitlan for some time, they desired to make an alliance with the king of Colhuacan, and therefore chose to nominate as their ruler Akmapichli is how you say that, right? The king of Caloocan, and therefore chose to nominate as their ruler Akmapichli, Pichli. You gotta put your tongue on like the ridge of your to make that sound or whatever. But Akmapichli, who was the son of the Mexican chieftains by a daughter of the Caloocan ruler, and evidently lived with the latter, for it is related that on giving his consent to the king of Caloocan, stated that if only a woman of his family had been nominated, he would have refused to trust her to the Mexicans. The farewell words he addressed to Akmapichli are worthy of quotation. Go, my son, serve thy God, be his representative, rule the creatures of the God by whom we live, the God of day, of the night, and of the winds. Go and be the Lord of the water and land owned by the Mexicans. That's what the father of Akmapichli said, right? Supposedly. As it is subsequently stated that Akmapichli and his queen were received at Tenochtitlan with great honors, it would seem as though the Mexicans, who from some deeply rooted religious idea considered it essential to have a female ruler of the line of the king of Caloocan, obtained their desire only to be accepted by a male member of her family as a protection and a safeguard for her sacred person, right? Because they ain't trust no the mother niggas over there. You feel me? Nah, you gotta have a brother or sister, your brother, your cousin, somebody over here protecting you. Because these niggas out of line, right? So he wanted somebody of his own, bloodline of his own family to protect his daughter or granddaughter or whoever it may be, right? Let's continue. What it said. Yeah, so let me go back right there. So it says, as it is subsequently stated that Akmapichli and his queen were received at Tenochtitlan with great honors, it would seem as though the Mexicans who from some deeply rooted religious idea consider it essential to have a female ruler of the line of the king of Kalua obtained their desire by only accepting a male member of her family as protection and safeguard for her sacred person. It may be that for the reasons of safety and preservation, the female ruler who was the living representative of Sao Siwakoat, gradually retired into absolute seclusion, whilst a man of her kin assumed in public her title and prerogatives. So right there, it basically said, you know, somebody if a person was basically somebody of her family was basically her bodyguard, right? And she still controlled the action or whatever she wanted to do, but in public she was behind closed doors. In public he was the one that was calling the shots, but behind closed doors she was basically, right? So unless it is assumed that this was the case, it is impossible to explain why Akma Bichli is designated in the Codex Mendoza as having begun to rule in the year of I Dekbat, or Flint, approximately corresponding to AD 1364, with the title of Woman Serpent equals Siwakuat. From this date, the title seems always to have been borne by a man. When human sacrifices had become a prominent feature of the native code, and it became a duty of the Siwakuat to perform the bloody rite, it is obvious that it became impossible for a woman to fill this position, right? So Siwakuat, the lord of the underworld, also associated with the woman, earth, agriculture, among other things. When the Aztecs started to pervert these practices and perform, blood sacrifices and all that shit, they kind of, made the man do it. So even though they gave him the title because the woman couldn't continue to do it, supposedly. Now we just reading from this book, and this is what they telling us, right? Now we obtain, however, glimpses of the shadowy form of an invisible and venerable female ruler who is the head of the house of women, watches over the welfare of the women of the tribe, and officiates as a priestess with her assistance at births, baptisms, and marriages. In order to account for the obscurity which surrounds her, it should be noticed that the mere fact that the ideas of darkness and seclusion became inevitably associated with the female sex would naturally be indelibly, all right, associated with the female sex would naturally and inevitably cause the women to be housed up, veiled, and condemned to a comparative inaction and immobility, right? So this is what they saying eventually took place because of these ideas. So let's change to this next page, please. All right, just the next one. Page 64. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, let's continue. We at a primitive stage in the growth of the idea. In the growth of the above idea is shown in the case of Aztecas. The women of the tribe wore abundant covering, whilst the men on the religious principle wore none. A careful study of the conditions surrounding the Siwakuak, or high priest, shows that he also confirmed the exigencies of his position when he acted as the representative of the hidden forces of nature of the female principle. He and the entire priesthood smeared their bodies with black, cultivated long hair, and wore during the performance of certain religious ceremonies and a wide and long garment reaching the ground. It is noticeable that that the designs on the garments of the priests in the BNMS are invariably executed in red and yellow, the symbolic colors of the North and West, combined with black, the symbol of the union of both, the below. In this connection, it is noteworthy that the Mexican pictography that the faces of women are usually painted yellow, the color of the West, the color of the West, and equals the female region. Hold on. All right. Where was the female principal? Damn, my bad, y'all. My neighbor and shit. He and the entire priesthood smeared their bodies with black. We already was on that. Boom, boom, boom. All right, we all the way down here by. I'm gonna just start back where it says, it is noticeable that the designs on the garments of the priests in the BNMS are invariably executed in the red and yellow symbolic colors of the North and West, combined with black, the symbol of the union of both, the below. In this connection, it is noteworthy in Mexican pictography that the faces of women are usually painted yellow, the color of the West, equals the female region. The association of darkness, concealment, and secrecy with the female principle is exemplified by the fact that a building in the enclosure of the Great Temple of Mexico, named the House of Darkness, was dedicated to the Earth Mother, equals Cihuacoatl. Right? Other temples of hers are described as being cave-like, underground, dark, with a single low entrance, the door of which was sometimes sculptured in the form of the great jaws, open jaws of a serpent. Only priests were allowed to penetrate into these mysterious chambers where sacred and secret rites were performed, and a sacred fire was also kept burning in an adjoining chamber. Evidence, which I shall produce further on, establishes that the high priest Cihuacoatl dwelt at times in a house named the Place of Darkness, and annually sacrificed a human victim in the honor of the Lord of the Underworld in an edifice called the Navel of the Earth, or in an edifice called the Navel of the Earth. So there's some gems, man. Y'all make sure y'all run this back. Y'all got time, because the next what we on, next 5 pages that we about to cover, you probably gonna want to save that, right? The religious cult of one half of the Mexican hierarchy was distinctly nocturnal. The chief duties of certain priests were astronomical observation and the supervision of the sacred fire, which kept perpetually burning on the summit of each temple crown pyramid, and what was termed the sacred or divine brazier of the sculptured stone. Let's go on to the next John. All right. Two priests jointly watched by night and day received and transmitted to the flames the incense offering of the devout. The temple fires were extinguished only at the expiration of a cycle of 52 years, and were then rekindled by the high priest at midnight, precisely when with impressive solemnity. All right, my bad, y'all. Neighbors and shit. In ancient Mexico, it shall, however, be observed, although the logical association of women with the hidden forces of nature, the underworld, and the below had exerted a certain influence over her practical existence, it had yet to given yet giving a rise to the idea of her inferiority as compared to a man, the associate of the heaven, the above, and the visible and active forces of nature. So right now, basically, I know it was choppy reading. Y'all can read it yourself, right? But right there is basically saying how eventually, somehow they start. At first, though, the woman and the man was looked at as equal. It was no everything was equal. They had different powers or positions, but they were equal, right? They need each other. Without one another, the other one didn't go right, right? Basically, right? Duality, balance, all that good shit. But then at a certain time, uh, certain men start to look down on the women just because of certain things they was putting together, which was all abstract. It was just their opinion, right? But yeah. Let's continue because this is going to explain it better than I am. All right. Where was that? I'm gonna start back where it says in ancient Mexico. In ancient Mexico, it shall, however, be observed, although the logical association of women with the hidden forces of nature, the underworld, and the below had exerted a certain influence over her practical existence. It had not yet given rise to the idea of her inferiority as compared to a man, the associate of the heaven, the above, the visible and active forces of nature. The native sages did not identify her so intimately with the earth as to deny her possession of a soul, the celestial spark. On the other hand, it is curious to note that the Nuat word for wife is Siwa Tlancli, Siwa Tlancli. And for husband, it is Tio Chisli. So Tio Chisli, right? It is possible that the particle slan, let me pronounce it right, slan, and in the first and Tio in the second may have contributed to the strengthen the association of the women with the earth, Datli, and Tlan and land equals land of, and the man with Diot, the sun, something divine and celestial, right? So they're breaking it down in the words why certain things meant certain things, right? In the course of time, it is doubtlessly would have transpired in Mexico as elsewhere that the set of primitive ideas which during untold centuries imposed upon the women's seclusion, obscurity, and inactivity, and thus hindered her development of strength of body and mind, and would have directly induced an inferiority. This has subsequently proclaimed, as we know, in many countries as direct proof of her lower nature and of her affinity with the element earth. The assumed and actual inferiority, my bad, y'all, of women may have therefore be regarded as logical, inevitable, but artificial result of the primordial classification and association suggested by the same natural phenomena which are visible to all inhabitants of the same latitudes. These ideas occur to all people at a certain stage of their development and exerted a dominating influence over the subsequent growth of their intelligence. It is but now that unconsciously mankind beginning to emerge from the leading springs of its infancy, which became an iron bondage to its prolonged childhood, right? So she really talking her shit right here. She's like, you niggas was looking down on women, and that kind of kept us back. So now that we realizing that we both is needed and equal, shit starting to look up. And this was written this was written before women was allowed to vote in the Americas, right? This was written late 1800s, like 1890 some shit. Mexico at the period of the conquest, the absolute equality of the male and female principles was theoretically maintained, and at the same time, it is possible to discern certain agencies at work which were tending to connect the below and the female principle with harm and evil. So it's some fuckboys that basically did that shit, right? They took it and they took the below and the earth and agriculture, shit that gives us life and food and the set. Like, come on, cuz, and you associated that shit with harm and evil. That's crazy work to me. But let's continue. Let me change the page for you. From time immemorial, it had been the custom of the Chichimecs, who, according to the Sahuagin, inhabited an extremely poor and barren region of Mexico, to sacrifice the first animal killed in a hunting expedition and to offer it to the sun, whom they call father, and to the earth, their mother. They severed its head and raised this as though offering to the sun. Then they tilled the earth where the blood had been spilt, and left the animal which had been sacrificed on the spot. All right. This passage establishing the cultivation of the soil where the blood had been spilt sheds a flood of light on the origin of the offering of human blood and the sacrifices of human life, which were such a prominent and hideous feature of the Aztec religion. At the beginning of the 16th century, instead of the blood being spilt directly upon the earth to ensure an increased fruitfulness of the soil, a human being was stretched across a conical stone, which had become thus the image of the earth mother. His heart was extracted and offered to the sun, the above, and his blood was smeared on the mouth of certain idols representing the below. That is crazy work. In the BNMS, an interesting illustration and account are giving of an idol of the Earth Mother, whose figure as standing on a pedestal adorned with skulls and crossbones, with outstretched tongue, which signifying that she always had a great thirst for human blood and never refused sacrifices offered to her. Right, so that's why they put the blood on the mouth of the certain idols to signify that crazy ass shit. Now, two priests are likewise pictured in the act of offering bowls connecting human blood to the idol, and a third mounted on a ladder and is pouring the contents of another bowl over his head. It is obvious how the constant associations of the Earth Mother with sanguinary sacrifices and the bloodthirstiness would in time give rise to the idea of a hostile, maleficent power linked to the darkness and devouring fire, who, under the aspect of the serpent woman, waged an eternal warfare on the human race and clamored for victims and bloody sacrifices. That's some shit. That's the shit I told you they perverted. We wasn't on that shit. That's these later motherfuckers. These people that came later and started doing crazy shit, man. But let's continue. I ain't saying that we ain't do some stuff. I ain't saying that. I'm just saying the way they was doing some certain shit, they perverted our teachings and knowledge. I'm gonna say that. The natural sequence to the above associations is that in ancient Mexico, the powers exerting fatal influence upon the human race are all represented as female. Let me read that part again. I told you how they trying to play the female, right? The natural sequence to the above associations is that in the ancient Mexico, the powers exerting fatal influence upon the human race are all represented as female, because they say the female represents the below, but it also represents earth, right? Which also represents agriculture, corn, and a lot life. And come on, man, they're a little confusing with this shit. But let's continue. The Siwakuat, or woman serpent, the Siwa Pitlin, and the Tezizimi, etc. These and other various personifications of the female principles are described in detail in my notes and commentary to the BNMS. After considering the foregoing data, it seems impossible not to conclude that it must have taken centuries of time for the idea of duality or the above and below to have taken such a deep hold upon the native mind and to have produced such a growth of symbolism and association in so many ramifications of thought. Hold on, let me change this so y'all can follow along. All right. Boom. Ramifications of thought. Let us endeavor to obtain a further insight into the native mode. Now, pay attention to this part right here, right? Let me go back. Boom, 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 boom. All right. To conclude, the duality or the above and below to have taken such a deep hold upon the native mind and to have produced such a growth of symbolism and association in so many ramifications of thought. Let us endeavor to obtain a further insight into the native mode of thought by carefully studying some significant details concerning the social organization of the Mexicans from a time of Acmapitzli to that of Montezuma and the influences it has been subjugated to gradually, right? The first ruler unquestionably ruled as Cihuacoatl, a name which means either woman serpent or female twin. This fact in itself testifies to an epoch-making change in the organization of the Mexican government, in the making of which a concession was made to a previously existing order of things by the retention of the female title by a male ruler, right? So I told you at first that our people, our ancient ancestors, which gave these people some of the knowledge they have, always believed that the male and the female was equal. At some point in time, some weirdos took over and said, "Nah, we'll keep your name alive, this shit, but we taking over and re-ruling and we subjugating you to a lower form of you know what I mean? Yeah, so our inferiority, some shit like that." But that was, bullshit. Let's continue. Having carefully studied the question for many years, I have long considered it proven that when the Mexicans settled in the Valley of Mexico, they came under a series of influences imitating from an ancient and highly cultured center of civilization situated in the South, which had followed during untold centuries from the same lines of primitive thought which have been stated. This question of contact and influence from an older civilization is so important, and the material I have collected on the subject is so extensive and complex that it cannot be adequately treated here. Further on, I shall discuss at a certain historical data throwing light on ancient contact and influences. All right. So that's a gem. Hold on. Now, where was that treated here? Now, further on, I shall discuss. Yeah. All right. Let's read that part again. Now, meanwhile, as I state here, that having carefully weighed all testimony, I accept as amply proven and well supported the testimony of Las Casas, Torquemada, Mendida, and others who record that Mexican culture hero Quetzalcoatl. You remember some people pronounce it. I used to pronounce it as Quetzalcoatl or I forgot how you say it. I say it right now. It's Quetzalcoatl. Was an actual person who came to Mexico from Yucatan. Now peep this, right? And this is what he's saying. So it says, who record that the Mexican culture hero Quetzalcoatl was an actual person who had came to Mexico from Yucatan twice and had finally returned thither, leaving a small colony of his vassals behind him, whose influence upon the religious and social organization and symbolism of the tribes inhabiting the Central Plateau can be plainly discerned. Montezuma himself, in his famous speech to Cortez, right? This is what Montezuma said, which latter carefully reported to Emperor Charles V, stated that we, the Mexican rulers, were brought here by a Lord whose vassals of all our predecessors were, and returned from here to his native land. He afterwards came here again after a long time, during which many of his followers who had remained had married native women of this land, raised large families, and founded towns in which they dwelt. He wished to take them away from here with him, but they did not want to go, nor did they receive or adopt him as their ruler. So he departed. But we always thought, oh, let me change this so y'all can follow along. Shit. I'm going, cuz. What page you be on? Yeah. That's it. He wished to take them away from here, right? But they did not want to go, nor did they receive or adopt him as their ruler. And so he departed. But we always thought that his descendants would surely come to subjugate this country and claim us as their vassals. Now, this is what Quetzalcoatl said to Cortez. You feel me? Telling the history of Quetzalcoatl, which is a person, a title, and a deity, right? It's all three. Now, I do not see how it is possible to construe such plain, unadorned statements of simple, commonplace facts into the assumption that Montezuma was recounting a mythical account of the disappearance of the light god from a sky, as upheld by some modern writers who interpret the whole episode as a sun myth or legend. I have already shown that the meaning of the ocelot skin and the spider employed as symbols by the Mexicans is apparent only when studied by the Maya language of Yucatan, the land whence the culture hero is said to have come by the foregoing authorities. I will add here that in Maya chronicles, it is stated that the culture hero had ruled in Chichen Itza, the first part of which named is Chincha or Chichen, which means red. Chichen, in Mexican record, it is described that he departed by water from the Mexican coast and traveled directly eastbound for Tlaxcalan, a name which means red land. I draw attention to the fact that anyone sailing from the mouth of the Panuco River, for instance, in a straight line towards the east would inevitably land on the coast of Yucatan, not far from the modern Merida and the ancient ruins of Chichen Itza. I shall also produce evidence further on to show that the meaning of the much discussed name of the culture hero's home, Tlan, is also furnished by the Maya language. From more than one source, we learn moreover that there were several Tlans on the American continent. The conception of twin brothers as the personification of the above and below had been adopted in Yucatan, and it is to the influence emanating from the source that I attribute the movement made in Mexico to substitute male twin rulers in place of the male and women who had previously jointly ruled the ancient Mexicans. All right, now let us now analyze the Maya title Kukulkan, of which Quetzalcoatl is the Mexican equivalent. As already stated, the word Kan means serpent and the numeral 4, and is almost synonymous with the word for sky or heaven, which is Ka'an. The image of a serpent therefore directly suggested and expressed the idea of something quadruple incorporated in one celestial being, and appropriately symbolized the divine rulers of the four quarters. Hold on, let me boom. Right. So you heard that part, right? So in the word Kukulkan, the word Khan is qualified by the prefix Kukul in the Compound Mayan Dictionary published by Brazier D. Berberg. The adjective Ku or Kol is given to the divine or holy. Kukul may therefore be analyzed as the divine serpent or the divine sword. When Maya sculptors or scribes began to represent this symbol of divinity, they must have searched for some object easy to depict the sound of whose name resembled that of Ku or Kol. The Maya adjective feather being kukum, so feather in Maya means kukum. The artist evidently devised the plan of representing an effigy of the divinity, a serpent decorated with feathers. Of this simple attempt at representing the divine serpent in sculpture or pictography is due, in my opinion, she said, in her opinion, the origin of the feathered serpent effigies found in Yucatan and Mexico, which have so puzzled archaeologists. And that shit is everywhere around Yucatan. Like when you do the research and start looking at these temples and places and where Kukulkan or the serpent is all sculptured everywhere. Shit, they got what them shits called? The pillars. They got pillars of shit of just serpents, right, holding up walls, or it's just a field of pillars too, right? But let's continue. Of Kukulkan, the culture hero of the Mayas, is recounted that he had been one of 4 brothers who originally ruled at Chichen Itza over 4 tribes. These brothers chose no wives but lived chastely and ruled righteously until at a certain time one died or departed, and 2 began to act unjustly and were put to death, and the one remaining was Kukulkan. He appeased the strife which his brother's acts had aroused, directed the minds of the people to arts of peace, and caused to be built various edifices. After he had completed his work at Chichen Itza, he founded the great city of Mayapan, destined to be the capital of the Confederacy of the Mayas. Friar Diego de Landa relates that the current opinion amongst the Indians of Yucatan was that this ruler had gone to Mexico, where after his return or departure, he was named Quetzalcoatl and revered as one of their gods. Before analyzing the Nuak rendering of Kukulkan's name, I will point out the noteworthy coincidence that during his reign at Chichen Itza and Mayapan, he practically united in his person and assumed the offices formerly fulfilled by 4 rulers, of which he had only been one. Right. I moreover draw attention to the remarkable sculpture columns which support the main portal of the main pyramid temples called El Castillo at Chichen Itza. That's what I was just saying, right? But if you go when you go, because I made content on this shit already, this book and everything. So, but when you look at it and I put it in my content, you will see what I'm talking about. Shit's fire though. These represent gigantic feathered serpents and are figured on Holmes' most instructive and useful archaeological studies, part 1, monuments of Yucatan. The feathers carved on the massive columns are evidently the precious tail feathers of the Quetzal, which the peculiarity of exhibiting according to the way the light falls upon them, blue, red, yellow, and green colors, precisely those assigned to the 4 quarters by the Mexicans, and for all we know, the contrary by the Mayas. Right? Whether this feather was chosen for its peculiarity or for its beauty only, as to which the effigy of the divinity Khan, of course, can only be conjectured. In Mexico, numberless effigies of feathered serpents exist. The resemblance of the sound of the Nuak words feather equals Iwat Iwak, and the heaven or sky equals Iwak, Iwak, Kat, Iwakat, Iwakat, Iwakat should be recorded as their possible reason for the association of feathers with the serpent and as a means of conveying the idea of its divinity. It should also be noted that Quetzal, the name of the most precious feathers natives possess, resembles in sound of the second part of the Nahuatl words for flame, Tetzalcoatl, or the tongue of fire, equals Tetzalcoatl, that the feathered serpent was an image of the divinity is finally proven, I think, by the following passage by Saugan, which establishes the earliest form under which divinity was revered by Mexicans was that of fire. Of all the gods, the most ancient one is the god of fire who dwells in the midst of flowers and in a bowl surrounded by four walls and is covered with shiny feathers like wings, right? And you know, this fire symbol is associated with the below. So in other words, that's like saying that the oldest god will be a woman, right? But let's continue. Who dwells in the midst of flowers in a bowl surrounded by four walls and is covered with shiny feathers like wings. It is thus shown that whilst the word Iwak, feathers, suggested something divine, the word Quetzal, besides the name being of a particular kind of feather, conveyed the idea of something resplendent or shiny. The name for a serpent, Coatl, signified twin. Thus, this is a profound analogy between the Maya and Mexican symbol, pointing, however, to the Yucatan form as the most ancient, right? Like I always was saying, that they took the Mayan shit and just kind of perverted it, right? Let us see how the name Quetzalcoatl occurs in Mexico and is given the name of the supreme god whose substance was as invisible and intangible as air, but also revered as the god of fire. The constant reference to the air in connection with the supreme divinity caused him to be also adored as the god of air and of the four winds. On the other hand, the divine title of Quetzalcoatl was carried by the culture hero whose personality has been discussed and who was a Yucatec ruler and a high priest, Sahuagin, and the name for high priest was Balam, or ruler, high priest ruler, right? Sahuagin informed that Quetzalcoatl, the plural form of the word Quetzalcoatl, was employed to designate the high priest elsewhere. Hold on, let me change the page. Y'all get this last page before we get up out of here. To designate the high priest elsewhere designated as supreme pontiffs, who were the successors of Quetzalcoatl. He also states that the high priest of the temple was the representative of the god Quetzalcoatl, the priest who was the most perfect in his conduct and in his wisdom, was elected to be high priest and assumed the name of Quetzalcoatl. There were two such high priests equal in rank and honors. And we're going to stop right there. You feel me? We're going to leave it right there. And we're going to pick up exactly where we're leaving off today. So y'all play this back. You know what I mean? You know, y'all can screenshot the pages, do your research on it. I encourage everybody. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it, to encourage everybody to do their own research, you feel me? And just to share some knowledge that I found profound. You feel me? So, I appreciate everybody that did tap in, the ones that may be in the hallway watching, and the ones that came in and liked my live, man. I appreciate all of y'all. Peace, love, and power to my people, and probably see y'all tomorrow.